Okay, this is going to be a quick and dirty explanation of the brakes here in Run8 and some of the usage and terminology. I'm no expert, but I've played enough Run8 that this is how I've interpreted them through the understanding and the education that I've had from professionals and just my pure experience in Run8. So, the three important gauges to look at. This is in the ES44. I've got about 100 coal hoppers behind me, so that it takes some time for the air to move. But the equalizer here, brake pipe, and brake cylinder. Rear is also kind of important. We'll talk about rear, though, in a moment. So equalizer, this is what your brake lever is set at. 90 psi means your equalizer is released. If you're running Amtrak, I believe the Amtrak locomotives run at 110 psi. Brake pipe, this is what the pipe, and I say that in quotation marks, pipe of the is. And the brake pipe is all of the air, all the air hoses from the locomotive to the rear of the train. So that's, imagine the entire train is one long pipe of air. That's what the brake pipe is. This is what your brakes are currently doing. My brakes are set to 90. The brake pipe is attempting to sit at 90 as well. BC, this is your brake cylinder. These are your locomotive brakes. A couple other things to touch on here. Main, this is how much air pressure is in the main air tanks. Locomotives have to fill these up, and then this is where the air pressure actually comes from. Rear, this is the air pressure at the rear of the train. Now you can use Shift Z to toggle up this bar up here. And this actually will tell you what your brakes are doing and your coupler strains and all that. That's actually a pretty cool bar to have up if you want to know more about how that is. Flow is how much air is actually flowing out of the train towards the rear. I have an EOT, which means that I'm going to be losing a little bit of air. Now, the flow rate is at the locomotive. EOT has a tiny little turbine in there, and it takes some air from the brake line, spins that turbine, generates the power to run the electronics inside the EOT. If you have a locomotive on the rear of the train, you don't have to worry about that. Now, when you go ahead and do anything with your brakes, you release the brakes, the air has to flow out at the front of the train, because that's where the controls for the brakes are at. If you do have a rear DPU, it will also activate the brakes from the rear of the train. So this is our little train monitor bar up here. If I release the brakes, all of the air has to vent out the front of the train. So all the air here can't move out until all of this air here has moved out. So it takes some time for that air pressure to leave the train. Now, watch the gauge here, or watch the BC. This is our independent. I'm going to do a full application of the independent brake. You can see the independent brake goes up. Main reservoir comes down a little bit. Compressor kicks in and we'll fill that back up. And we can go ahead and release that, and now the rear brake comes off. You can ignore this down here. This is just the DPU monitor. Now, if we watch here, I'm going to do a 10-pound reduction on the train brake. And watch what happens with the equalizer, the brake pipe, and the brake cylinder. So do our 10-pound reduction down to 80 pounds. Brake pipe comes down, rear comes down. This bar, you see how it's slowly getting more and more yellow? That's because the brakes are applying more and more here, and now they're applying more here as well. Because again, it takes time for all that air to flow. But also our brake cylinder came up to 21 psi. So our locomotives just slammed on their brakes while the rest of the train gradually applied the brakes. So I'm going to go ahead and release the brakes. There it goes. I use a rail driver, and my rail driver is showing its age. So now we can see equalizer's at 90, brake pipe is slowly coming up, rear is not quite there, and we can see that the brakes are releasing from the front of the train towards the rear. And if we had a rear DPU, it would be from the rear and the front towards the middle, because the air would actually flow. Depending on the locomotives, I believe SD40s don't do that. So what you want to do, if you want to do a proper braking reduction, at least how I've always done it, especially if you're using your dynamics, is I will do my 10-pound reduction, and immediately as I'm moving the brake lever, I am bailing off the independent at the same time. So my brake pipe, or my brake cylinder, my BC, right here, it never goes up. My locomotive brakes never apply, and I'm 100% relying on the train to start slowing me down. This way you keep the locomotives and the train in constant tension until you're ready to start applying the dynamic brakes. And then you'll get that slack action of that train now. The locomotives are slowing the train down faster than in the dynamics, or the dynamics are slowing the train down faster than the train brakes are. So you're going to get a little bit of slamming. That's just how it is. There's the locomotives have draft gear to handle that. And that's why you always bail off the independent. If you're just applying the train brake, you're also applying the independent brake, even though you're not moving the lever. I mean, when you look, I can see I've got my equalizer at 9 or at 80, brake pipe sitting at 80, brake cylinders at 0. Independent brake is fully released. Let's actually do a full application of the train brake. So we'll go all the way up. And we bailed off. So the train brake's fully applied, independent's fully released. Do a full release of the brakes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's do a full application and watch that brake cylinder come up. That's independent brake applying. But the independent lever didn't move. It's just because they're linked together. And you can see here, even look, our locomotives have fully locked up their wheels. The rest of the train has barely started braking yet. Although we got this one weird spot because we didn't fully depressurize the system, or repressurize the system as it should be. And then let's actually quickly go ahead and delete that. I'm not on a server, so it doesn't matter. So I'm looking more of like the GP40s, SD40s. It's the same deal. So your red, on this one right here, your red is your main white reservoir. Your white is your equalizer. That's what you actually have your brakes set at. Right here, red is your brake cylinder. This is what the independent brakes are at. White is what the brake pipe is at. So not really going to get much movement here, but if I release the brakes, you can see we went full release. The brake cylinder dropped to 0 because we don't have any independent brake. The brake pipe went up to 90, and the equalizer, which is the white needle here, went up to 90. If I do a 10-pound reduction, we see the equalizer come down, train brake come down, and the brake cylinder go up. And then we can also do just the independent brake, and there goes just the brake cylinder rising. We do see a little bit of a drop on the reservoir, but that's fine. That one you can more or less ignore the red needle on this gauge. And then this would be your flow indicator right here. So hopefully that helps you out a little bit.